Okay, good evening. I'd like to call the Davie County Commissioners meeting of December 2nd, 2019 to order. This time, I would ask Commissioner Jones to lead us in the invocation.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Let's pray. Father, we come here tonight with thankful hearts. Father, we've just come through Thanksgiving, and Lord, tonight we just ask briefly that, Father, you touch our hearts. Give us daily hearts of gratitude, hearts of thanks, hearts of praise, hearts of worship, hearts of joy. And Father, tonight that you would bless this meeting, give us wisdom and discernment, Father, to enact the business of this great county that you've placed us in, Father, based on what your will is. And Father, what's best in your eyes for the people and the families of this great county. Father, we thank you for men and women that fight on battlefields tonight that we might be free. We thank you for men and women in law enforcement and our fire departments and our EMS that, Father, are called to keep our homes and our streets safe. We thank you for those that teach our children. We thank you for placing us in this freest of all lands. And most of all, we thank you for this season that we celebrate the birth of a Savior. And we pray this prayer in Christ's wonderful name. Amen.
Amen. If you will stand and join us for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Right. Appreciate everyone coming out tonight on this cool evening. So, the next item on the agenda is the election of the officers for the upcoming year. So at this time, I will turn that over to our attorney, Mr. Vogler.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Per Robert's Rules of Order, Chapter 15, Section 47, as the invited temporary presiding officer of the Davie County Board of County Commissioners, I hereby declare the next order of business for this honorable court to be the election of a chair and vice chair to serve for the ensuing year. We'll first elect the chair and then the vice chair in that order. We will need nominations in a second for each position. If more than one person is nominated and seconded, we will have the board vote on each individual in the order of their nomination. The first person to obtain a majority of the possible votes will be declared the chair or vice chair. I would now open the floor up for nominations for the position of chair. Do we have any nominations for chair?
Yes, I'd like to nominate Commissioner Reniger to be chair the next year.
Second that.
Do we have other nominations for the position of chair? If not, I'll now call for a vote on the nomination. All those wishing to vote for Terry Reniger as chair for the ensuing year, please raise your right hand. Opposed? We have a 3-2 vote majority for the chair. I would now declare Terry Reniger as chair of the Board of County Commissioners for this next year. I'll next open the floor open for nominations for the position of vice chair. Do we have any nominations for vice chair?
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Attorney, I would nominate James Blakely for vice chair for the coming year.
We have a nomination for the position of vice chair. Do we have a second?
I'll second that.
Do we have other nominations for the position of vice chair? Seeing none, I would now call for a vote on the nomination of James Blakely for a position of vice chair. All those in favor, raise your right hand. All those opposed, we have a 4-1 majority vote in favor of James Blakely as vice chair. I'll now declare James Blakely as vice chair of the Davie County Board of County Commissioners for the ensuing year. I now declare the elections for chair and vice chair closed, and we'll turn the meeting over to the new chair, Terry Reniger, for the adoption of the agenda and all further business.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Vogler. All right, at this time we will entertain a motion to adopt the agenda.
So moved.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor, raise your hand. That is approved. Next, we move to the public comment period. Mr. Vogler, do we have anyone signed up?
Chairman, members of the board, we do not have anyone sign up for public comment this time.
Okay. All right, the next item is public hearings. We have 4 of those this evening. The first one is a zoning map amendment, and I will ask Mr. Meadwell to come forward and present, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Before you tonight, you have zoning map amendment 2019-11. This is a request by Jerry Douthit to rezone the remaining portion of a 0.47 acre portion of tract from residential 20 to highway business. Currently, the property is split zone with around 10,000 square feet of property being zoned highway business, and the other 10,000 odd square feet being zoned residential 20. This highway business zoning was initially established in 1973 when the county first initially started zoning. So that portion never did come before the board as an actual rezoning request, just as a overall zoning map approval for the county. Subject property is listed at 1295 U.S. Highway 801 North and is at the corner of Willow Oak Lane, and is further described as Davie County Tax Parcel C69501. Included in your agenda package, you'll see a zoning map of the area, which kind of shows you the L-shaped portion of the R20 zoning that surrounds the highway business. However, there are other properties in close proximity that are also zoned highway business. Included in your package also is an aerial photograph. There's a retail business existing on the site, as you can see by the vehicles and the gravel area. The subject piece of property is located in an area that is listed as residential on the Davie County land use plan, and is also listed as rural growth in the Davie County growth enhancement strategy. Issues to consider before the board. This request comes to you as a general use rezoning. So all those uses that would be allowed in that highway business zoning district should be considered in your making your decision. The other issues that the board should consider is that the expansion of an existing commercial type use, the property's potential as a residential use, the property's potential as a further commercial type use. The property's location along a major arterial street in the county. The planning board heard this at their October 22nd meeting and voted unanimously to approve by a vote of 6 in favor and none opposed to rezone the request. Action that the board should consider tonight. The board should move that the following statement be adopted in support of a motion to approve, either 2, move that a following statement be adopted in support of a motion to deny, or 3, defer the request for additional consideration. I'll be more than glad to answer any questions that the board may have concerning this matter.
Okay. Any questions for Mr. Meadwell?
Yes, if this property is rezoned tonight and to be used at a later date, the person will have to come back to get a permit.
Sure. Yes. If there's any change of use or any expansion, any things of that nature, any change to the property, it would have to comply with any of our land development ordinances, just like any other piece of property.
Landscaping. And,
Correct.
right.
Any other questions for Mr. Meadwell? Okay, thank you. All right, this is a public hearing, so I'll turn it over to Mr. Vogler.
The chair has announced this is the day and the hour of the public hearing pursuant to Chapter 153A of the North Carolina General Statutes and pursuant to Chapter 155 of the Davie County Code of Ordinance. This board is conducting a public hearing on proposed rezoning request to rezone a portion of .469 acres from residential 20 R20 to highway business HB. The property is located at 1295 NC Highway 801 North and is described as tax parcel C195.01. There has been due publication and notice of the public Hearing in the newspaper of general circulation within Davie County on November 21st, 2019, and November 28th, 2019, as required by law, and the clerk to the board has attached the affidavit showing publication in the paper at a date at least 10 days prior to today's date. I would ask all who wish to comment at this public hearing to come forward to the podium. First, state your full name for the board, and then comment on the proposal. Just around at the podium where the microphone is. Thank you.
I'm Vivian Allen. I live down Willow Oak Lane. This is Winona Gregory. Her mother lives in the house before you get to mine. Our concern is, and you maybe answered this, Mr. Bourne, we know that in our community there have been rumors going for some time that Dollar General is beating the bushes looking for property right where we are. My question to Mr. Davie is, has he been approached like some of our neighbors have? I don't want to live next to one, and so if this piece of property is opened up and a larger portion of it is rezoned, that I think opens another can of worms in our immediate neighborhood for possibly a business that we don't particularly want as a community. Did I understand you correctly, to say that if this is rezoned, if you approved his rezoning of this, his request, that if somebody else wanted to do something with it, it would have to come before you again? Is that what you said?
That's what I asked.
That's what you
If it,
Mr.
if it
Mead
would
will.
have to come before the zoning and planning board for buffering.
If we pass this evening, what,
It might have to come back before you as a legislative body to
Right.
approve a site-specific site plan.
But it would come before
back
planning
before,
and
like
zoning.
any other development project, it would come back before our TRC.
Right,
Right.
but it would still be able to be used for whatever, if they complied with whatever.
That's a question.
I'm asking you.
You're asking me.
I'm
Okay.
asking you, well,
Well, you need to ask
whoever,
the
I'm
board.
asking, whoever can answer my question. Okay, the next thing is, in times past, I have seen pieces of property that were rezoned, and the whole idea was we're gonna plant trees, make buffers, and all this kind of good stuff, and it didn't ever happen. And when I questioned people at the planning board, they said, essentially, that's an ordinance in this county, and there's nobody to enforce it. So the truth is, if you rezone this piece of property and Dollar General came and bought it from Mr. Davie, which I can't blame him for wanting to sell it maybe, and they said, we're gonna do this and this and this, they don't have to do that, and there's nobody that can enforce that. Am I right?
If it is in the ordinance that they have to do certain things,
Yeah.
and someone then contacts the planning and zoning department, I'm sorry, if they contact them and indicate that it has not been done, then at that point in time, they have the authority to send out letters of violation to the individual. If that does not work, then the county has the authority to bring a lawsuit against the individual to enforce the provisions set forth in the zoning ordinance and in their requirements.
And so 10 years we've lived beside something we don't like while all this goes on. You see what I'm saying? I don't blame you, Mr. Davie, for wanting yours rezoned. I would want it rezoned if it were mine. It shouldn't have been done to start with, in 1973 or something, but, you know, that's a whole other thing. We strongly oppose this for the reason that, first of all, if you go from Hillsdale to Farmington, when you get to the north end of Yadkin Valley Road, from there north, things are pretty calm and quiet. It's pretty much residential, no matter what some of the zoning things are. And you realize some of this zoning stuff came in 1973 or whenever it started, and really shouldn't have been left like that. But it was, and it is, and, you know, we have to sort of live with that. But I realize someday down the road, this is gonna come up, and there's no telling what we'll have up that road. But I think the longer you can leave it sort of a nice, quiet community, the happier we'll all be. And the better it will be for everybody. My suggestion to you.
If you could come up and state your name, please.
My name is Winona Gregory, and my mother does live on this road with Miss Vivian. My grandparents actually built the building that Mr. Douthit uses back in, way before my time. My grandmother at one time listed taxes. It was a tax office. And that was, I think, 50s and 60s. In the 60s and 70s, my grandparents sold antiques out of it. And then it just became a storage building. It's a little cinder block building. If you go on Google Maps and look at that area, nothing would lead you to believe that anything in that area is anything but zoned residential. The road, the little road that goes to Vivian's house and my mother's house was built by her dad, my granddad, and my dad. And the way it's set up it is an easement for our two families and Mr. Tesh. It's a little country road that actually we used to get to hayfields back in the day. It hasn't changed much. The hayfields are still back there. My mother is elderly. She'll be 84 in March. The last thing I want to do is to have any kind of a business there. Now, Mr. Douthit is there, and it's pretty unintrusive. I guess my question is, why is this coming up now? He's been running that business for a long time under the residential, so why is it this now is of utmost importance to have it rezoned? That's my question that I haven't gotten a good answer for, that I'd like to get an answer for tonight.
Jerry Douthit, I'm the owner of the property. In answer to your question, there's an existing garage on the property that I plan to turn into an office building because I'm going to probably slow down and retire in a few years. And to answer Vivian's question, nobody has approached me about buying the property. It is not for sale. So, I bought the property when I retired, to be able to have a small place to continue my used car business, because I have a big lot in Clemens behind Dunkin' Donut that I'm not able to do as much work as I was years ago, so I wanted a smaller place. That was the reason I bought that. If you look on your zoning maps, there are larger pieces of commercial property across the street and behind my shop that would much more suit a Dollar General store than mine. My property will not hardly even perk at all. The land in Farmington is real bad about the clay. It will not soak up the water, and the water stands as deep every time it rains. So Dollar General don't want my property, trust you. But it works out perfect for what I want, and I want to put an office in that smaller garage so that when I retire, I can lease out the garage to somebody, or they can use the garage for a garage, and I can have a place to keep my dealer license. That's the whole purpose of the rezoning. When I bought it, I had no idea that half of it wasn't zoned, the full place wasn't zoned commercial. I had no idea, and only found out about it when I decided to turn that building into an office. The building is already there, and there's going to be no change in the property. It's going to continue the way it is right now. And even the planning board has told me that they know that I'm using the whole property for commercial. They don't have a problem with that. They said they don't have a problem with that at all.
So why is it an issue? We don't need
If
If
Because
nobody
I-
has a problem with it, why is this an issue?
Because DMV says I have to have a separate address for that office. That's the whole reason for this. I can't have another dealer license, unless I have a separate address on that property. Now, to answer your question, I can accomplish what I want to accomplish by going and sectioning off my building. There's a room in the back. I can turn that into an office and get an address for that room. But that ain't what I wanna do. I wanna use that building that's there, not being used for anything but storage, to continue to have my dealer license. That's all this is for, so that when I retire, I can still sell a car or two and keep my dealer license to drive my rollback or whatever I need to do, my classic car. That's the whole purpose of it. Nobody has approached me about buying it, like I said, and the property is not for sale. So,
Did I
They
understand?
don't have a problem with Mr. Davie. No, our only fear was what we just
no,
told you.
I'm telling you, Dollar General don't want that property. Had I known it was as bad as it was, I wouldn't want it.
It don't hurt.
It will not perk. No, you can't even.
Any other public comments? There's a lot of private comments going on up here at the podium. How about public comments?
Sprinkles, you can't flush the commode for 2 days.
I guess just, you know, from kind of a point of ignorance here is in a nutshell, he's been doing what he's doing for quite a while and nobody's objected to it. And I don't understand why he can't keep doing what he's doing. And I get, you know, the little idiosyncrasies with setting up an address. It just seems like that's the path of least resistance instead of rezoning land that is residential, it's farmland, it's country land. People live, elderly people live on those roads, young kids live on those roads. It's,
And by the same token, who would wanna build a house on that remaining piece of property? I mean, it's destined to be commercial, the whole thing. You know, nobody would want a house over here beside this garage with junk cars in front of it. I mean, common sense.
Just a quick question for Andrew. It's half an acre, right? That's rezoning, or basic, or a little less than a half an acre.
Okay, so,
We leave it with you.
well, I mean, you have as long to speak as you want, as you like, but it's public, yeah.
Name is Jason Shepherd, Ms. Catherine Johnson. We live directly beside this property. It's never been an issue of any sort for us. If it's gonna be loud or bothersome to anybody, it would be us. We don't have any problem, and he's exactly right with the perk. Like I said, we have the house, we just refinanced it and bought it last year. It don't perk good. Like I said, nobody commercially gonna want that land, trust me. But again, for what it's worth, so no bother to us, and we live closer than anybody in this room to it. No bother of any sort to us.
would it not bother you if it were a Dollar General and traffic coming in and out?
Not really, I walk across the street and get milk. But that doesn't bother me
I would
at
say the
all.
two other people that live on that road might disagree. Thank you for your time.
The shore property across the street is a much bigger place for Dollar General.
I understand.
Anyone else wish to come forward during this public comment section?
It just clarify too, we do have, as Ed said, we do have enforcement capability of these ordinances. As a matter of fact, we expanded the dimensional requirements here recently and, yeah, okay.
Did I understand you to say that you plan to rent the garage to someone else?
Someday, possibly,
And then you would just have the little office?
there's already a building there, it's not gonna be anything else built. The building was already there.
Anyone else wish to comment? Mr. Chair, seeing no one come forward to comment, I will now turn the public hearing back over to you as board chair. Close the public comment section of the public hearing and providing you the opportunity to close the public hearing and discuss then among yourselves what, if any, action you wish to take with regards to this matter.
All right, thank you. All right, at this point, we will declare the public hearing closed, and any comments or questions for the board, from the board?
I will say, if I lived there, the aspect of that garage being rented to someone in the future without a noise ordinance in the county would greatly concern me, because I know what it's like to have noisy neighbors, and if you rent it to somebody who wants to work on their car at 2 o'clock in the morning, then they gotta deal with that too, so that's a little concerning to me as a rural living person, but.
We actually work on a drag car next door all the time.
Mm-hmm.
It is zone commercial.
And I live like less than 80 yards from the place, and the other neighbors that are here, they're hundreds of yards past that. It's never bothered me at all.
Just a possibility.
Mr. Meadwell, for the public, for the record, if Mr. Douthit was renting his, or decided to sell the property, assuming this rezoning goes forward, the new user would have to come back with a site plan. Okay.
If for instance, if Dollar General did choose to, hypothetically, they would have to come back. And, if Mr. Douthit decided to expand, build another structure on the property, those requirements of the ordinance would have to.
Any other comments? Okay, seeing none, I'll entertain a motion to approve, deny, or defer.
Mr. Chairman, I'll make the motion to approve.
Okay, I have a motion. Do I have a second?
I'll second that.
I have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All right. Seeing none, all in favor of the motion to accept the rezoning request for the .47 acres for Mr. Douthit, raise your hand. Four opposed. Okay, that passes 4-1. Thank you. Right, next we have a second public hearing. This is, a lot of people have been doing a lot of work on this, and we want to thank them for that. The comprehensive land plan for Davie County. And so at this point, I will call on Mr. Meadwell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to introduce Jesse Day with the Piedmont Triad Regional Council. The Piedmont Triad Regional Council has assisted the county in this process to update our land development plan, and actually it's probably more than just a land development plan. It's what we consider our comprehensive plan, where we include all different aspects of county services and processes that we do. So with that, as you mentioned, this has been a long process. A lot of people have gotten involved in this, and I'd like to go ahead and turn it over to Jesse and let you go ahead and
Thank you, Andrew. Thank you, members of the board. I appreciate the opportunity to present this comprehensive plan. Like we said, we've been working on for quite a while, almost 2 years. My name is Jesse Day. I'm the planning director at the Piedmont Triad Regional Council. Thank you for your membership in our voluntary association of local governments. We're pleased to be provided the opportunity to work on this comprehensive plan. I'm going to walk through an executive summary of the plan document that you have in front of you that really compiles all that work that we've put together over the last 2 years. But in addition, looking at all the plans that have gone on before this and compiling them into one concise document, I think will be very useful for the planning staff and other departments in the county going forward. And I'll go over some of the nuts and bolts of that as I walk you through the plan. So here's the here's the table of contents for the plan. And just to point out, on my slideshow, I've got page number references on the slide. So if you do want to go into more detail in the document you have in front of you, those page numbers should be referenced. Sometimes they're page ranges. I'm not going to go over the overview and purpose in a lot of detail. We adopted the existing Davie County vision, have some guiding principles there, but this is a guide for development. It's very broad. We just had an example of a very focused decision on a particular piece of land. This is very broad and comprehensive across the county, so it's more long range in nature, and is a guide for basing those decisions that you just took under your belt just a second ago. We are looking forward. We've done some projections out to 2050, looking at population and employment growth, but in terms of a working number, we looked ahead about 20 years. This is a guide for 20 years of development, but probably a good idea, especially with the growth you have in this county, to update it every 5 to 10 years, depending on changes either in population, particular developments, or particular employment changes that are happening, and I'll go over some of those in detail. Very important for any plan that's comprehensive and long range like this is a good level of public involvement. And this slide summarizes that level of public engagement. We also have detailed meeting minutes in the appendices that you have as well for all of these meetings that I've got up on the slide here. So as we entered into the process, we established a blue ribbon committee to guide the development. So that was citizens as well as departments in the county. We also had what we call focus groups, really meetings 1 hour to 2 hours long with some particular questions about what's important to you in Davie County, what do you want to see in the future, those sorts of things. And so we went and talked with senior adults, young professionals to see why are they choosing to live in Davie County, what are their concerns about the future. We had a couple of real estate meetings, professionals, so that would be real estate agents as well as some folks in the development community. So we had a meeting in Moxville and Bermuda Run on that. We also talked with staff in agriculture and natural resources professionals. We had a couple of folks on our Blue Ribbon Committee, too, that represented that area as well. Arts and culture representatives. We talked to the Recreation Park Department Director and some of their employees, and then members from underserved communities. So we talked to some nonprofits that are providing service to those folks that may be looking for a helping hand with housing or otherwise as well. So again, we've got all that documented in the appendix and just a kind of a short summary in pages 11 through 14. As the Blue Ribbon Committee met a few times, and we had a subcommittee of that looked at kind of the growth, that future projection of about 50% growth. I'll show you in just a second going forward. We developed those recommendations in collaboration with that Blue Ribbon Committee and Planning and Development staff, and then went out and showed those to the community at those public meetings, those open houses earlier this year, and got some feedback on kind of what's important, what resonates with folks in terms of those policies going forward. And so that was really good. Probably had on average about 20 people at each of those meetings. In addition, Andrew mentioned bringing a lot of different plans together. There are quite a few. You've got a couple iterations of land development plan, comprehensive transportation plan, parks and rec, economic development plan. You've got community-based land development plans, farmland preservation, the community health assessment. So we really incorporate all that into our document and compile that sort of on a timeline that you see on the image in the lower right. And then in addition, have a brief kind of profile of data and demographics that summarizes population demographics in the county. And then moving to Chapter 3, I mentioned we've got different focus areas that we touched on, and this was really established early on with the Blue Ribbon Committee. We looked at sections on land use, housing, economic development, utilities, transportation, farmland preservation and natural resources, parks, open space, recreation, trails, and health. And that's really how we shaped our buckets of policy recommendations that I'll share with you in just a second. So got a lot of detail there, almost 47 pages or so between 20 and 67. What we wanted to do is say, what is changing with housing in Davie County and the country? What is changing with transportation? What are important issues and trends? So in some cases, we provided maps. In other cases, charts on sort of job growth if we were talking about economic development. And so there's a lot of detail there that sort of teed up some of the policy recommendations that we had in the later chapter, Chapter 4. And in Chapter 4, and I know I'm moving pretty quickly, I'm going to spend most of this evening on Chapter 4 and those policy recommendations that the Planning Board considered at their meeting last month. We spent a long time on discussing the growth strategy. So I'll talk about that in just a second, but almost 50% growth is estimated between now and 2050 in the county. And so where are all those people going to go? And where are they going to work? So we kind of assessed what kind of land that would take up. We also, you had an existing future land use map. We enhanced that and modified that in discussion with our Blue Ribbon Committee, the towns that are growing, providing some of that growth in the county, and also through our open house forums. And then a lot of time was spent on compiling future policy recommendations. So I'm just going to walk through all these kind of buckets. And so the information, the executive summary portion for Chapter 3 is really on the left, where we've pulled some data. I'm just giving you snippets. There's a lot more detail in the document. And then on the right is what you'll find in the Chapter 4 policy recommendations. Now, I will say this is a really higher level because those are typically goals that are listed there, and then we've got specific strategies that are embedded in the plan. I'm not going to get into the detail of the strategy unless you want to pull one out. We can discuss that in my presentation this evening. So, I mentioned the growth that we're facing in terms of, a little over 20,000 additional residents between now and 2050. You've got a lot of land use that is residential or vacant, total of 150,000 acres or so. 94% of that is vacant or residential right now. You've got about 1,500 acres zoned for industrial. About 2/3 of that is in use. So what are the recommendations around land use and community appearance? And those are on the right side there. Heard this a lot, and what's important here is that rural character. But also, we heard some, important things about utilizing existing brownfields and gray fields in developed areas, so increasing the infill. Protecting environmentally sensitive areas are really important. Ensuring quality commercial office and institutional and industrial development. And then make sure we have a diverse industrial base for those higher income paying jobs that you can find in manufacturing. So I'm going to move through these relatively quickly. Please feel free to stop me if you have any questions or want to understand some of those goals a little bit better. Housing was a huge issue that came up in almost all of our folks. Of course, the real estate folks are like, if we could just build $150,000 houses, that's what people are always asking for, and we just don't have a supply of that. I think part of that is what builders are choosing to build. Part of that is the high cost of land and amenities that maybe are required by the market. And then also, margins in commercial development are just better than building, single-family residential. So I think there's some compounding issues, both that you feel here in Davie County, but trust me, you feel across the region that we work in and across the country, because what you've got is housing prices that are accelerating faster than incomes. So that's a challenge, but you're not alone. So, I think a couple of strategies to that is looking at increasing those housing options, and you could do that through mixed-use developments, getting creative with how you compile commercial and residential developments into one development proposal. Higher density housing there's certain locations where that's appropriate, maybe in the municipalities, but there's a role that the county plays, obviously, in providing sewer to those locations that's required for that higher density housing development. And so improving the appearance of those and better location of those. Improving the existing housing stock, age, and quality. So there's programs at the regional council for single-family rehab and other sorts of grants that can be used by individual homeowners or landlords to improve that existing housing stock, just basically increase the housing supply. And then, more education both for the development community but also the public about housing options and types to see what's available out there. Economic development, we took many of these from the pretty fresh economic development plan that was finished early last year. But, you have by far the highest job growth. I know those years are a little bit old, but highest job growth on a percentage basis of any of our 12 member counties. So that's a great asset. But where are those folks living? That sort of thing, I think, is where, they recognize that in the economic development plan that you guys approved last year in terms of talked about housing and the need for more of that. Your median household income is higher than the average in the Piedmont Triad. It's also above the average for the state, which is about $52,000 annually. And so, you know, I think the fact that you have a strong manufacturing base and been successful with economic development and recruitment, you know, has helped that. Education, health services, trade, transportation are your three top employers by industry. So really what you see up there, it shouldn't be any surprise that was included in the plan approved last year. Lots of text on this slide, a lot going on here with the new East Davie sewer project, as well as the interconnection with Moxville. But, you know, some of the things I wanted to highlight here that cross over into some of those other buckets, maximizing public access for utilities. And so as new sewer and water lines are extended, you can look at allowing trails as well as the access to maintain those lines on those utility easements. I think that would be a good thing to establish. Coordinating with your largest municipality and serving primary and secondary growth areas. I'll talk about those in just a second. Establishing wastewater allocations to service municipalities and increasing utilization of existing infrastructure. No surprise there. Transportation, you know, look, you know, this is you've got part in the Metropolitan Planning Organization, part in the Rural Planning Organization, so some different needs around transportation, but a lot going on in that right now. NCDOT is working on a comprehensive transportation plan that includes Davie County right now in the beginning stages. I think at the January meeting you'll be hearing from them in a little more detail. The County Parks and Rec Department is working on a comprehensive walking plan, and Alta Planning and Design is working on a regional bike plan that includes Davie County. There's 5 other counties included in that too, so looking at some different options for those. But we have a lot of recommendations in our policy chapter on page 84. But you know, looking at different revenue to support the improvements in transportation, I think is important. You know, is that solved at the county level? I think that's more of a regional or state issue as well. Promoting safe routes to school, that's the idea of being able to walk or bike to school to reduce car trips, creating a connected multimodal network, more park and ride lots, gateway design on the bridges coming, the overpass bridges coming into Davie County as an opportunity. You can leverage a lot of federal funding if you put up a little bit in terms of local support for that. Oftentimes you can leverage almost 80% federal funding for some improvements to those overpass bridges as a way to say, hey, this, you know, we're in Davie County now, and you've got the new extension of the Baltimore Road interchange as an opportunity. So that's something I think that's important to keep discussing here. And those other recommendations during new industrialized access to major highways, that's been a policy recommendation for a while, supporting complete streets and mobility options. There's a lot going on at the NCDOT about complete streets, and that's the concept of building for bike, ped, transit. And the switch that they made is that actually you've got to prove that you don't need bike, ped improvements, that you don't need transit improvements. Otherwise, that will be incorporated into the design of those roadways if it warrants it. Okay, a lot of this was in the Farmland Preservation Plan here. You know, actually, in terms of preserving farms, you're not doing too bad in between 2002 and 2012. We have more recent data. The agricultural census happens every 5 years, so we have 2017 data that just came out in late summer. But in terms of preserving the number of farms, you're doing better than most areas there in terms of not having too much of a decline. But the size of the farms are going down, which is probably no surprise. You see the breakdown between livestock and crops as well. But I think the area of concern there is the age of farmers is increasing. So if you're going to preserve that as a part of your community, a part of the county, you know, more attention to this is needed. And there's some great recommendations to strengthen that part of the economy in the Farmlands Preservation Plan that we've incorporated into the comprehensive plan draft before you tonight. I'm not going to read through all of those. Parks, open space, and trails. The county runs a a lot of facilities, kind of hard to see on the map there, but those are all the facilities there, in addition to the schools that offer open space opportunities. But every plan that we do, when we ask the question about what's important, always trails and parks comes up as a very, very important quality of life feature. And so you'll see in our land use recommendations, as you dive into the strategies, a lot is around creating more opportunities for trail development, whether that's through the easement donation or constructing and finding the resources to construct trail. And Paul Moore at the Recreation Department has a great plan that he's working off of, and have a great new park to showcase as well. So I think there's a lot of interesting things going on in this area. I will say the Comprehensive Transportation Plan, I think, is an opportunity to get a lot of infrastructure on the ground. So if there's trails and sidewalks in that plan, NCDOT will fund 100% of that if they're doing an improvement to a roadway. So it's very important that those priorities get incorporated into that Comprehensive Transportation Plan document if we're going to look at leveraging state and federal funds to build that infrastructure. So we talk about implementing greenway, trail improvements, the open space and easement dedication. Of course, the Parks and Rec Department is working on the pedestrian plan now. There's an opportunity to build public art into facilities and programming as a way to improve that user experience and add some feel to trails and public park areas. Health, a lot of this is found in our community health assessment. I'm not going to read through all of this, but I think the important things here is that the social determinants of health are getting more and more important in terms of how our Medicaid dollars are spent in this country and in this state. So there's a transition happening there in terms of Medicaid, and the state's taken a step towards trying to give flexibility. North Carolina got a special exemption to look at spending Medicaid dollars in a different way to have better health outcomes. So I think there's some opportunity here. Thinking about housing, the housing options as a health outcome, the senior population, and how are we taking care of them in terms of what their healthcare needs are. Lots going on in this area, and so we have several recommendations listed there as well. So that's a really, really quick run through of the policy recommendations. I just wanted to touch on the growth strategy analysis that we went through, and I know you, I guess about a year ago, had seen I recall Andrew had mentioned that there was a presentation on sort of where we're headed with some of these growth projections, but based upon the growth projections, I'm going to jump ahead a slide here. I apologize for the small print. You've got an existing population of about 42,000, projected to go to 64,000 in 2050, and an employment to go from about 18.5 to 27.7. And so what we did is looking at the existing, how much land a single-family house takes up, how much a multifamily house takes up, a mobile home takes up, the retail land uses, did a kind of estimate on what those, if that kind of status quo was to continue in terms of those, how that residential and commercial, institutional, industrial is laid out. Based upon that growth projection, what land would need to be utilized. And so that's where we came up with the estimate. Again, this is not a prescription for the future, but it's saying, hey, if nothing changed, this is how much land would need to be set aside for that future development. I think the opportunities in terms of maybe driving down the use of farmland and open space that this could take up is taking advantage of already developed areas. Looking at, are there areas to do more multifamily close to work, and then how are we going to work differently in the future too? I think that's another thing that maybe is a little bit of a definite unknown in terms of how much retail and industrial and institutional space will be needed to set aside for that future employment. So we took kind of the unincorporated areas and assigned that growth based upon the current split and came up with that 9,000 acres needed. So in our 4 growth strategy meetings to the Blue Ribbon Committee, we talked a lot about how much of the primary growth areas do we need set aside, how much of these secondary growth areas, and then what's rural growth. Essentially in this map of the entire county, you've got about 12,000 acres in primary growth, which should easily accommodate the estimate of the almost 10,000 acres of future development that's needed. Again, this is not a prescription. It's just an idea of saying, okay, if we didn't do anything, this is kind of how things would happen. So it's kind of a guide. I think that should be revisited when you do the 5-year update to see how things have changed. But it gives you a sense of, all right, we've got 50% growth in the next 30 years, and how's that going to be accommodated? So I want to briefly touch on that. I know you've heard a presentation on that already. And so our next step after the growth strategy was looking at future land use. And so really talked with the municipalities about what they're seeing on the edges of their towns and saying, do we need to change anything from the previous future land use map? And in some cases, we did change those on the borders of Bermuda Run and Moxville, but for the most part, this map has stayed mostly the same. And this will probably be referenced quite a bit going forward as Mr. Meadwell presents any rezoning cases that may come before the board. So the future land use categories that we established are based upon the existing conservation, rural residential, and residential mixed use, and then commercial mixed use and industrial. So again, this is not a zoning map, but this is just a future land use map, and you'll see the more intense land uses are along those major transportation corridors and where water and sewer is currently available. And you'll see the less intense uses where that is either there's conservation areas or water and sewer is probably not likely to be available in the near future. Now lastly, this is my last slide, or second to last slide, I promise. I think this will be useful. We've tried to provide a guide and linked together all those policy recommendations I shared with you, those goals and where they're found in other plans. How much would it cost if we were to implement those? So just kind of like on the low order to the mid order to the higher costs, and then a suggested time frame around urgency. We tried to look at the time frame piece and tee off of some of the priorities we heard in our open house meetings in terms of what folks felt like was urgent, building more trails or, changing some of the policies around easement dedication for open space and trails. And then tried to also identify key players, which in a lot of cases was Andrew's department, but if there are other, county departments or nonprofits or local municipalities, and they could be a partner in implementing that policy recommendation. Try to provide that in the plan. Hopefully that'll be useful going forward as a cross-reference and something to update as the plan gets used, as items get implemented, and then when you get to the next stage of a future update to the comprehensive plan, if it does get approved this evening or in the near future. So I'll conclude my presentation. I'll just ask Andrew if there's anything missing that you wanted to highlight that we discussed at the planning board. I think we had a pretty long discussion there on the policy recommendations and the growth strategy, but they did make a recommendation to move this plan to the Board of County Commissioners this evening. Have any questions?
Just a couple of things to add here. First of all, Jesse, thank you for being here. Just so the public knows, the commissioners have their hard copy, but anybody who wants to see this comprehensive plan, if you go to ptrc.org/Davie, all this information will be there. I want to thank the Blue Ribbon Commission that the commissioners appointed. They were critical in getting us to this point. I want to thank our towns. All of them were instrumental in providing information from their comprehensive plans. department directors and applicable departments that some of these recommendations impacted, and obviously our PTRC staff and partners, and a special thank you to our plan and development department. They put a lot of hours, as Jesse said earlier. We started talking about this 2 years ago.
We did, yeah.
And this is a major undertaking that to do right takes a while, and will kind of set the stage for the future. So it's a product that we're proud of, and I know it's a lot to absorb and take in, but just wanted to thank all those people, and thank you for appointing that Blue Ribbon Committee.
Thanks, Rob.
Okay, anybody have any questions for Mr. Day?
Perhaps not for Mr. Day, but this is a broad, skeletal, theoretical, these are recommendations. Any specific changes that need to be made, processes that need to be implemented would have to come back to the Board of Commissioners. We're not approving a 100-page change to the way we do things in the county. This is just a broad way to look at things, but specifically, we have control over the specifics of the implementation. Yep.
Yeah.
Any other questions for Mr. Day?
I just have a comment. Jesse, I'm not really sure how you keep up with everything that you have to do, but thank you very much. Every presentation that I watch you do, I'm like, how in the world does he keep up? Thank you for all your work.
Thank you, Commissioner Finney.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman.
All right. So again, this is a public hearing, so I will ask Mr. Vogler to take over.
Chair, as now this is the day and hour of a public hearing pursuant to Chapter 153A of the North Carolina General Statutes and Chapter 155 of the Davie County Code and Ordinance. This board is conducting a public hearing on proposed revision and update to the comprehensive land use plan for Davie County, North Carolina, as seen in the board's attachment 7-2-A of your agenda packet. There's been due publication and notice of public hearing in a newspaper general circulation in Davie County on November the 21st, 2019, and November 28, 2019 is required, and the clerk of the board has attached an affidavit showing publication in the paper on the date at least 10 days prior to today's date. I would ask all who wish to comment at this public hearing come forward to the podium, state your full name for the board, and then comment on the proposal.
Good evening. My name is Jeff Allen. I'm here sort of wearing two hats tonight. One as the chairman of the Davie County Planning Board. So last month we did unanimously approve this. I want to thank Jesse and Andrew and the commissioners for putting this all together, and the forward thinking it takes to keep our county on the right track and developing in the right way. Change happens, you can't stop it. I'm glad we're steering in the right direction. As a surveyor, I'm also happy to see this because it's going to allow some of the same things I just mentioned, but allows some cleanup to some of the ordinances, allows rezonings to go a little smoother. They're again going in the right direction, but so from two viewpoints, I recommend approval of this. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else wish to come forward to the podium? Comment. Seeing no other person coming forward to comment, I would now turn the public hearing back over to you as board chair to close the public comment section of this public hearing, provide the board the opportunity to discuss among yourselves what, if any, action you wish to take with regards to this matter.
Okay, thank you. All right, at this time, we'll declare the public hearing closed. So turn it back over to the board for comments.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to thank the committee and staff for all their hard work. I make a motion to approve.
A motion to have a second.
Second.
I have a question for Mr. Day. I should have asked this when you were up here earlier. You're projecting the population in the county to go up by 22,000 over the next 30 years. And we've been hearing that we're flat, and we are flat. I got that. But what was your growth theory to arrive at 50% growth?
Those are not my projections. I just want to make sure to mention that. But we used what's a data set called Woods and Pool, and NCDOT uses this. Metropolitan planning organizations use this as a projection of growth going forward for employment and population.
So,
So that goes out 30 years. I'm sorry, Chairman. Go ahead.
well, so, I mean, we've experienced some great economic development news, and hopefully that will continue, but is that what's driving that? 'Cause that's a big increase.
Yeah, so there's no crystal ball for the future. So they're looking at, the last couple of years. The state demographer also has a projection too in that ballpark. They don't go out as far. They only go out, I think they'll go out to 20. Well, it'll get close to that. But yeah, I mean, they're looking at, the previous growth, what's going on in the metropolitan area, because Winston-Salem's right there. You can capture some of that growth or you cannot. I mean, you can steer that away with really restrictive zoning going forward, or you can capitalize on some of that growth. But I'd say that the high employment growth is probably driving some of that future population growth projection. So
Do you-
very far out in the future?
Somewhere in your data, do you have the age demographics of that growth? Because, I mean, as I look at that, we have Mr. Junker here from the school board. I'm thinking, where are we gonna? We're looking at bonds. We're looking at potential of having to build new schools. That's that level of growth.
Yeah, and
Been around a while, and we
that's why I
haven't.
encourage. I'm sorry.
No, you go ahead. I'm ready.
That's why I encourage you to update this on a 5-year basis, because first of all, there's a lot of things happening. A slower growing county, maybe on a 10-year scale, was safe for updates. But there's so much going on in employment and the need for housing. Lots of commuting in. But we've got information on that we could provide on commute inflow and outflow. But to answer your question, Commissioner Jones, about age growth, this does not provide the age breakdown and growth, but that is happening. I mean, you've got an aging society, so that is something to consider, especially when you're talking about schools. You got to look at that population, the family population, that'll be driving some of that infrastructure going forward.
Mr. Chairman, if I could add one thing to Mr. Day's point here. We're looking at a lot of data sets right now. We just finished our economic development strategic plan last year. We finished our county strategic plan. The aging plan was just completed. When Mr. Day showed this slide with the timeline on the bottom, all those plans have been taken into account. One reason why we wanted to do this comprehensive plan, and not just a land use plan, is to include those departments that had plans that were applicable, that had goals that needed to be accomplished. But in every data set we've looked at, because there's a lot of different data sets you can pull, we're one of the fastest growing counties in the state of North Carolina per capita. And I think, the reason for a plan like this is, how do you plan for that? What do you need to do to get ready for that? If it happens or if it doesn't, you at least have it as an indicator to know that you got to start thinking about it. Not that anyone's promoting it or not that anyone isn't. It's an indicator that you just need to look at every 5 years just to see what those trends are. But again, whether it's that number or another number, I mean, it's the percentage continues to grow.
Yeah.
I mean, clearly, the trend is growth, but if you take the age of our current population, and that's a net change, your new people is substantially more, which that's good. I mean, we all think this is a great place to be, but apparently a lot of others will think that, so that's good. So, all right. Thank you. Okay, so we have a motion and a second. John, do we need to ask for just read this after that?
If you'll read that exactly as it's stated to correlate with the planning board's approval.
After we vote on the motion or now?
You want to read it?
Yeah, I'll read it, Mr. Chairman. So, as we mentioned, the planning board heard this and voted by unanimous decision to approve. What staff would ask you to do is make a statement of approval that the amendment promotes the public health, safety, and general welfare, that the plan is consistent with all applicable adopted plans and measures of action be reasonable in the public interest. The said approval furthers the goals, objectives, actions, maps, and policies of the growth enhancement strategy. That the adoption of the updated comprehensive land use plan replaces the plan adopted in 2005 as it re-examines the development needs of the county. The approval includes the adoption of the comprehensive land use plan, including the accompanying map. The updated plan encourages the most appropriate use of land throughout the county.
All right. Mr. Jones, you made that motion, you would,
Encompass that in the motion.
great, thank you. You would second that, Ms. Finney? Or
Richard did.
Richard, yeah, okay. All right, motion and a second. All in favor, raise your hand. That is approved 5-0, and thank you, Mr. Day, Mr. Meadwell, and all the people on the committee. That was a lot of work. All right, moving right along, we have a third public hearing on installment financing agreement for facility expansion. I'll call Ms. West.
Good evening. As I'm sure you all recall, in your May board meeting, you adopted a capital improvement plan. That was our latest update of the capital improvement plan. That plan included several projects that we needed to finance. In order to get economies of scale, we decided to roll them into one financing to take advantage of this. So on November 7th, the county issued a request for proposal to solicit bids for an installment financing agreement to finance construction improvements for 4 different projects. Those projects are for the Davie County Community Park Phase 1, the County Administration Building, the Brock Performing Arts and Recreation Center, and also the Sheriff and Health and Human Services Office. As you recall, when we talked about constructing the Sheriff's facility and a new HHS building, the costs were to be about $22.5 million. I have a slide to show you. Here we go. I can see it now. We estimated the cost at that time in 2017 to be about $22.5 million. As you know, the later you wait to construct something, the more expensive it gets. So right now, even if we went out for bid, you're probably looking at best, $30 million to construct those 2 facilities. But what we're proposing is to lease and upfit some space for the total of about $14 million. That'll save us at least $15 million, between $15 and $25 million. So if we've identified some other sources that we can use to pay for this along with this financing. The financing we're proposing is not going to exceed $9,250,000. So in this request for proposal, we requested the banks give us back 4 options: taxable and tax exempt, each for 15 or 20-year period. We got 5 responses to our RFP. We received them on November 21st. And after we reviewed each of these options, we're going to recommend that we take BB&T's option B for a 20-year tax exempt financing, bank qualified. It gives us the best flexibility and the lowest interest costs. Their interest rate is 2.73%, as I said, for 20 years. And we've financed other projects with BB&T, and we appreciate their partnership. And also, as next steps, we will be making application to the local government commission that would also have to approve this financing to get on one of their future meetings. Do you have any questions?
Any questions from Ms. West?
Just a couple, to dig down a little bit deeper
Sure.
in the issue of the sheriff's HHS.
Uh-huh.
So we looked, first of all, at multiple properties, and maybe you cannot answer that, John. Maybe you want to elaborate a little bit more on that. So we did not just go to one property. We sought out different properties.
Correct, yes. I can expand on that a little bit
Please.
more. We looked at properties around the area in Moxville. We looked at some storefronts that were available. The facility that we're looking at right now is 68,000 square feet. That's a really large facility because we have a need for about $30,000, 30,000 square feet for Health and Human Services, and about that or a little bit more for the Sheriff's Office. So this facility, we were able to, consolidate both of those departments. So the Sheriff's Office is spread over about 6 or 7 different facilities right now, and so is Health and Human Services amongst a lot of buildings. This would get them all under one roof to help them, consolidate and be able to operate a little bit more efficiently. Also, it gets them out of some aging facilities, and also, we identified this as a need in our facility needs study that we did back in 2016, 2017, that this was a need. That's where these 2017 estimates of $22.5 million are coming from. If we constructed it new, it would be $14 million for Health and Human Services and $8.5 million for a sheriff's office back in 2017. So we didn't just pick and hone in on this one property. We've looked, and we continue to look to see if there was a place to put, either of these, because it's going to be a whole lot cheaper, as we can see here, to lease or upfit an existing building than it would be to build it from the ground up.
So basically, in when we first started discussing this, I have some issues with this. But basically, then the scenarios that you looked at, and in multiple scenarios of leasing versus building, purchase, whatever it might be, under all of those scenarios that you assessed, the lease option was the least expensive.
Correct, yes. Because we've looked, we looked at some other properties around here, and, it's hard to find something that large, There's not another $68,000 to $70,000, 68 to 70,000 square foot building to house these, nor is there very much of it in the 30,000 square foot range. We've tried to identify those, that are available to be used for us.
So in terms of the specifics of the contract, and I don't want to get into what we're looking necessarily, but when we looked at the lease values of this property, we're at market. We're actually at below market.
We're well below market, yes, is what we're proposing right now. Is we did a study a couple of years ago on what, for our own facilities, that we have some other partners that we charge rental payments to do a market study for leases of what a good market rate would be. And this is well below that. The lease agreement we're talking about is very much so below that market rate per square foot.
Well below market.
Mm-hmm.
And then the other concern I had is that we're locking in a long-term lease agreement on this property, right?
Right. Correct.
It is a 20-year lease with 2 5-year renewal extensions if we so choose.
Basically 30 years.
Correct. And we did factor that into all of our analysis as well. So,
right. So the lease payments that you see here, that $7.2 million is for 25 years is what I've identified there. So that's, encompasses the great majority of the lease payments.
And we won't get into the issue of need necessarily. The sheriff is here, but our options were, because of space needs and requirements, we're either going to build or we're going to lease. There's no question about that. I mean, in other words, we have no option to stay where we are in the current environment. Yeah.
No. You staying where we are is not, a good thing. And like I said, you all remember the facility space study, hopefully. You recall that this is definitely 2 of the major needs. There were a couple of other projects identified, and this would take care of 2 of these major needs identified in that space study.
Okay. So to summarize my feeble mind, we searched multiple properties. We looked and assessed lease versus rental in multiple assessments, and leasing was the least expensive option for the taxpayer. We're leasing the facility long-term, up to 30 years, at below market rental values or lease values at this time.
Correct.
Thank you.
are correct. Are there any other questions? Any other things I can clarify? And just to let you know, we're still getting information. There are a couple of projects for this building in particular. There are some small projects at the Brock building. They're waiting on getting bids back, as well as for, we're gathering information still for the upfits at the Sheriff and Health and Human Services offices. But, you know, I just wanted to let you know that the amount of the financing will not exceed what we have in your board packet of $9,250,000. We've identified a couple of other funding sources we can use, you know, should anything change.
And just to clarify, that you're looking at about a $15 million savings there in the lease
Correct.
versus.
At a minimum, yes. It just depends upon the timing of when we would construct these new buildings, should we have no other choice.
Okay.
For the record, Ms. West, would you like to describe the other project that's involved?
Yes, so the other remaining projects are the Davie Community Park Phase 1. We have the remainder of Phase 1 that we were going to finance. This building has some HVAC and roof needs, so that's going to be about $500,000. And we have some lighting and flooring and other upfits that we want to do at the Brock Performing Arts Center and the Recreation Center.
So the $15 million anticipated savings on a present value basis is just on the $7 million.
Correct. That's just on that one.
The Sheriff and the
project,
Human Service.
The one project out of the 4 projects. So.
Gotcha. Okay. Any other questions for Ms. West? Okay. All right. Again, this is a public hearing, so I will turn it over to Mr. Vogler.
I will apologize in advance to the board. This is going to be a rather lengthy reading that I have to do, part now and part later, and then another part later, in order to meet all the requirements of the IRS and the LGC. So the chair has announced that this is the hour and day of a public hearing on a proposed installment financial agreement entitled The Agreement to be entered into by the County of Davie, North Carolina, hereinafter called the county, pursuant to section 160A-20 of the North Carolina General Statutes as amended, the act, in a principal amount not to exceed $9,250,000 for purposes of providing funds, together with any other available funds, to pay the cost of A, acquiring, construction, renovating, and equipping various improvements to the Davie County Community Park, the County Administration Building, the Brock Performing Arts and Recreational Center, and the renovation and upfitting of an existing building to be used as a new Sheriff and Health and Human Services building, collectively the project. To ensure its obligation under the agreement, the county will grant a lien on all or a portion of the sites of the County Administrative Building and the Brock Performing Arts and Recreational Center, constituting a portion of the project, together with any improvements or fixtures located or to be located therein. The chair has acknowledged due publication of the notice of public hearing in a newspaper of general circulation in said county as required by section 160A-20G of the act, and directed the clerk to the board to attach the affidavit showing publication in said paper on a date at least 10 days prior to the date as it's shown in Exhibit A hereafter. The chair then announced that the Board of Commissioners would immediately hear anyone who might wish to be heard on the advisability of the proposed project or the financing as so described. So anyone wishing to speak on the proposed project, please come forward to the podium, state your full name, and then speak. Mr. Chair, seeing no one come forward, I will turn this public hearing portion back over to you as chair, close the public comment section of this public hearing, and to discuss and take action on this matter. And once you have discussed, then I have more to read to you.
Okay. Thank you. We will look forward to that. All right. So at this point, we'll declare the public hearing closed. So any comments from the board? Input? Okay. Seeing none, we'll ask Mr. Vogler to start again.
Okay, then someone needs to introduce the following resolution with the title of which will be read to you, and a copy of which has been distributed to you in your agenda packets to this resolution. It's a resolution making certain findings and determination regarding the financing of various capital projects for the County of Davie, North Carolina, pursuant to an installment financial agreement, selecting the lender and requesting the local government commission to approve the financial arrangement. It be it resolved by the Board of Commissioners for the County of Davie, North Carolina, as follows. Section 1, that the board does hereby find and determine as follows, and it's 1A through K, that there exists in the county a need to finance the cost of acquiring, construction, renovating, and equipping various improvements to the Davie County Community Park, the Davie County Administrative Building, the Brock Performing Arts Center, and renovating and upfitting an existing building to be used as a Sheriff and Health and Human Services building, collectively entitled the projects. After due consideration, the county has determined to enter into an installment financial agreement in an aggregate principal amount not to exceed $9,250,000 to provide funds, together with any other available funds, to pay the cost of the project and pay certain financing costs in connection therein. The county has solicited and received proposals from various financial institutions to provide the financing for the project, and upon careful review and consideration, desires to accept the proposal of Branch Banking and Trust, the lender. Pursuant to the agreement, the lender will advance to the county an amount sufficient, together with any other available funds, to pay the cost of the project and associated financial cost, and the county financing costs, and the county will repay the advancements in installments with interest, entitled installment payments. In order to secure its obligation under the agreement, the county will execute and deliver a deed of trust granting the lien on all or portion of the sites of the county administration building and the Brock Performing Arts and Recreational Center, constituting a portion of the project, together with all improvements and fixtures located or to be located thereon. It is next that it's the best interest of the county to enter into this agreement and deed of trust, and such transaction will result in providing financing for the projects in an efficient and cost-effective manner, and that entering into this agreement is preferable to a general obligation bond and revenue bond, and that the county does not have the constitutional authority to issue non-voting general obligation bonds pursuant to Article 5, Section 4 of the North Carolina Constitution, because the county has not retired sufficient funds debts in the preceding fiscal year, issued a significant amount of general obligation bonds for the financing of projects without its election, that the nature of the project does not allow for the issuance of revenue bonds to finance the project, that the cost of the project exceeds the amount to be prudent, provided for current available appropriations and unappropriated fund balances, and that circumstances exist require that the funds be available to commence acquisition and construction of the project as soon as practical, and time required for holding an election for the issue of voted general obligation bonds pursuant to Article 5, Section 4 of the North Carolina Constitution. Local Government Bond Act will delay the commencement of acquisition and construction of the project by several months. There would be no assurance the project would be approved by the voters, and the necessity of such project dictates that the project be financed by the method that assures that such project will be acquired and constructed in an expedient manner. Then it has been determined by the board that the financing of the project through the agreement is reasonable, comparable to the cost of issuing general obligation bonds or notes, or other available methods of financing as acceptable to the board. Council to the county will render an opinion to the effect that the proposed agreement is authorized by law and is for a purpose for which public funds may be expended pursuant to the Constitution of the laws of the state of North Carolina, and that the debt management policy of the county has been carried out in strict compliance with law, and the county is not in default under any obligation for repayment of any bonds, that no tax rate increase is expected to be necessary to pay the installment payment under the agreement, that the proposal of the lender to provide financing through the agreement for the purpose of providing funds, together with all other available funds to pay the cost of the project and associated financial costs, is hereby accepted, subject to further approval of particular documents relating to thereto by the board, that the county manager and assistant county manager and chief financial officer of the county will each be authorized and directed to execute and to deliver such documents as may be necessary to accept the proposal of the lender, that the board hereby authorizes and approves the filing of an application with the local government commission for approval of the agreement and requests the local government commission to approve the agreement and the proposed financing in conjunction thereof, and that this resolution will take effect immediately upon its adoption. Now we need a motion on that resolution that I just read.
Okay, so I'm gonna read what the resolution needs to say. If someone feels compelled to put that forward, then let us know. So, entertain a resolution making certain findings and determinations regarding the financing of various capital projects for the county of Davie, North Carolina, pursuant to an installment financing agreement, selecting the lender and requesting the local government commission to approve the financing arrangement. Would someone like to put that resolution forward?
I'd make that motion, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Have a motion. Do I have a second? Second. Any further discussion?
Just anything as long as Ed had to read here. It's just a question. Now, we are not seeking any increase in taxes to fund these projects, right?
Under Section K, no tax rate increase is expected to be necessary to pay the installment payments under this agreement.
Correct.
Thank you.
To that point, I mean, we've worked with our financing council, Davenport, and we've made sure that whatever we're borrowing is well within our limits to pay as we go, not have a tax increase. So,
yeah, well, it's clear that the issue, the major part of this, which is the Sheriff's Department, HHS, it's the least expensive way to move on this, but we certainly, at this point in time, don't want to have any sort of change in the tax rate.
have a motion and a second. Any further discussion?
I just still express my concern. I appreciate all the work you have done, and I understand that we have to make a change. But I am just totally I have a big concern about moving the health department to that location. I think that's moving it away from the people who utilize the services, and we're putting citizens who already struggle, we're giving them a larger struggle. And I wish all of this wasn't lumped together for that reason, but.
Any other points for discussion?
Quick question, and Benita, to kind of piggyback on that, the issue of Wyvetti and Cape Fear and those guys, the folks that we have contracted with, they would travel to that facility in terms of folks in need.
Correct. I will, after tonight, I'll be having a conversation with Wyvetti in particular, but keep in mind, we fund Wyvetti in an annual contract, so we would add this to our agreement. But after tonight, I'll be having that direct conversation with them, because them and Cape Fear would need to continue to provide transportation to that site. So that will occur.
Okay. Well,
in form of a conversation and via contract.
And I don't see that allays your concerns, but just to make sure that people aren't stuck.
Okay, any other comments? All right. So we can vote on the resolution as put forward. Thank you. All right. All in favor of the resolution as put forward, raise your hand. 4-4, all against. Okay, so that passes 4-1. And Mr. Vogler, do I understand you got some more?
Yes. Now someone needs to introduce the following resolution, which again has been read to you, and a copy of which has been distributed to each of you in your agenda packet. The resolution states, the resolution designating the chief financial officer of the county of Davie, North Carolina, to declare official intent to reimburse expenditures under the United States Department of Treasury regulations on behalf of said county. Be it resolved by the Board of Commissioners, the county of Davie, as follows. That it is hereby found, determined, and declared by the Board for the county as follows, that section 1.150-2 of the United States Department of Treasury regulations prescribes specific procedures which will be applicable to certain bonds or notes issued by the county, including without limitations a requirement that the county declared its official intent to reimburse certain expenditures with proceeds of the debt to be incurred by the county prior to or within 60 days of payment of the expenditures to be reimbursed. The regulation expressly permits the statement of official intent to be declared by any person designated by the county to declare official intent on behalf of the county. And the board for the county believes it's in the best interest of the county to designate the chief financial officer of the county to declare official intent on behalf of the county for such purposes. As permitted by the regulations, the chief financial officer of the county now or hereafter serving in such capacity is designated by the board to declare the official intent on behalf of the county to reimburse any and all expenditures with the proceeds of debts incurred by the county. This resolution shall take effect upon its adoption. That will be that resolution. Now, you need to ask the commissioners for a motion and a second on the following resolution that you'll need to read.
Okay. So again, for efficiency, I will read the resolution. If someone feels moved to put this forward, that'd be great. Entertain a resolution designating the finance officer of the county of Davie, North Carolina, to declare official intent to reimburse expenditures under United States Department of Treasury regulations on behalf of said county. Would someone like to make that resolution? Motion for that resolution.
Mr. Chairman, I'll make the motion.
Okay, Commissioner Jones makes that. Mr. Blakely seconds. And any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor, raise your hand. That passes 5-0. Okay. Mr. Vogler, are you through, or you need Gatorade, or?
That's it.
Okay.
I got some water.
Okay, all right. Okay, I know we're getting long here, but bear with us. So we have a fourth public hearing on the county manager form of government, and I'll call on Mr. Vogler.
Okay, the fourth public hearing comes before the board to deal with the proposed Chapter 31 of the Local Code of Ordinance. For some background on this proposal, Chapter 31, I would like to first state that the county, by resolution many years ago, adopted the county manager plan of government. If you recall, I think maybe the first county manager was John Barber back in the 60s, I believe. And however, we do not have an ordinance which grants the standard statutory powers given to the county manager. It's set forth in Chapter 153A-82 of our North Carolina General Statutes. That was all fine and good. Didn't have any problem with that until this summer, in which our Court of Appeals this summer indicated the need for such an ordinance in the case of the state of North Carolina in relationship to the city of Albemarle versus Nance. The court struck down a contract between the city of Albemarle and a third party in a nuisance actions on the ground that the council itself had not voted to retain outside counsel to bring an action for abatement of a nuisance. It was a hotel that was being used for prostitution. They wanted to shut it down. And the Court of Appeals, actually the trial judge first indicated that the town had not actually voted on entering into the contract to allow the attorney to bring a lawsuit, and then the Court of Appeals upheld the trial court's decision in that situation. And it actually struck down the contract between the city of Albemarle and the third party on the abatement nuisance because the council did not vote on that. The court agreed with the Nance argument that without a formal vote of the board, the governing entity had no authority to enter into the contract. Therefore, the lawsuit had to be dismissed. Had there been an ordinance which allowed the manager to contract with the outside counsel, the nuisance abatement lawsuit would have moved forward, and it would have probably shut down the hotel. The School of Government and its Coates Canyon blog by Chris McLaughlin, and we've had several blogs and several things on the lawyer listserv with the School of Government about this, indicates that the result of the case sets a troubling, and I'm going to quote him, sets a troubling requirement for local government boards to explicitly approve possibly all corporate actions, including contracting and even code enforcements. It would have to come before this board for you to approve it before we could do anything. And now, the blog goes on to quote Frida Bloomstein with the School of Government by stating that if the code provisions are silent as to how a local government may exercise a particular authority, then the default under the statute is that the governing board must exercise that authority. The blog says that the board is free to delegate such authority to other officials, but if they've not done so, then the resulting action by any other officials will be deemed unauthorized and void. The blog goes on to say that local government attorneys should review their local codes and amend them to make sure their codes conform to their current corporate practices. In other words, if you have a county which does not have county managers, but everything's done by the board, then you need to have your code say so. If it is done by a county manager instead of the board, then you need to give him the authority to do those things. And since Davie County has adopted the county manager plan of government, the courts have stated the county manager cannot act without the delegated authority from the board, then it's imperative that our board either grant the authority to the manager or take up each and every action at its meetings and vote to approve on all actions that's taken place in the county, on all contracts, on all violations of health laws or violations of zoning ordinances or anything else. Even though North Carolina General Statute 153A 82 actually grants to the county manager the powers and duties for the administration of all departments of county government under the board's general control, the court in the Albemarle case indicates that without an ordinance that also grants him that authority, these powers and duties are void and that the board has to vote on those. Hence the need for a Chapter 31 to our Code of Ordinance. And we were hoping, and I know there was a lot of discussion among the lawyer listserv with the School of Government, that maybe the Supreme Court would reconsider this matter in what's called a writ of certiorari and review the case and maybe overturn the Court of Appeals. They didn't do anything. They sat there and it was silent. And at the end of the 30 days, when that had expired, it became law in the state of North Carolina. So until there is another court case that goes to the Supreme Court, that's what we've got right now. So you've got a Chapter 30, a proposed Chapter 31 in your packet, and that's the only reason that we've got that we need to do something, is because of this court case. And I've been following this thing since actually I think it was June 30th when it was decided by, or June 29th, something like that, by the Court of Appeals, and it came out in Lawyers Weekly the following week. And I pulled that out and highlighted it and been following ever since, hoping maybe something would change on it. And nothing's changed. In fact, the School of Government recommends that we do something at this point in time to make certain that counties don't get caught proverbially with their pants down and get something voided that shouldn't be voided out here. So that's what we've got.
So we're just, it is a formality, but it's a required formality, given what's going on in the court system. We're not
By our
changing the
courts.
way that we're enacting government in any shape, form.
We're not really changing it. We're just codifying that which we already have been doing for years.
This doesn't change anything that's been done over the last 60 years.
No. Or however long we've had the county manager form of government. I think our first county manager maybe was John Barber in 60s or before. I don't remember when he came on board. He was here for several years, though.
Richard, you were on the board then.
I knew that was coming.
When was he here, Richard?
Okay. All right, yeah. Sorry. All right, so any questions for Mr. Vogler? Okay. All right. Again, this is a public hearing, so I'll turn it over to Mr. Vogler.
Chairman has announced this day an hour of a public hearing pursuant to Chapter 153A of the North Carolina General Statutes and North Carolina Davie County Code of Ordinance, and the board is conducting a public hearing on a proposed revision and update of the Code of Ordinance by adding a Chapter 31 entitled County Manager form of government. There's been due publication and notice, public hearing in the newspaper of general circulation in Davie County on November 21st, 2019, and November 28, 2019 is required by law, and the clerk to the board has attached an affidavit showing publication of the paper on a date at least 10 days prior to today's date. I would ask all who wish to come to comment at this public hearing to come forward to the podium, state your full name for the board, and then comment on the proposal. Mr. Chair, seeing no one come forward, I would now turn the public hearing section back over to you as board chair to close the public comment section of this public hearing and provide you the opportunity to discuss among yourselves what, if any, action you wish to take with regards to this matter.
Thank you for all your efforts and all your readings tonight. So, all right, any comments from the board? Okay, seeing none, entertain a motion to formally adopt the county manager plan of government under North Carolina General Statute 153A76, North Carolina General Statute 153A81.
I would make that motion.
Okay, I have a motion. Do I have a second?
I'll second that motion.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor raise your hand. Okay, that is approved, 5-0. Okay, again, hang with us here. I know we're running late. Next, we have a very special presentation. I'll call on Sheriff Hartman.
Well, I appreciate the time, gentlemen and ladies. Won't take much of your time. I also appreciate you joining with me. Jeff, would you come up with me, please? Lieutenant Jeff Harp is retired. He officially retired last week with 30 years of law enforcement service. So 30 years ago, Jeff started his career with Davie County, and he thought pastures were greener in other places, so he tried a couple other law enforcement agencies and realized this was the best place in the county to live and work, or in the state. So he came back, and he spent the last 20 years with the Davie County Sheriff's Office serving the citizens of Davie County. He started in the jail. He's worked as a patrol officer. He's worked in the civil division. He's been promoted to lieutenant over the years. And for the last couple of years, he single-handedly handled all the sex offenders in the county, registering them, checking on them, taking care of them. He's done a tremendous job, and he's been a tremendous asset, and we're going to miss him. Thank you all for joining with me in presenting Jeff with his duty sidearm and his badge. Jeff, we're proud to present you with this. Thank you for 30 years of service to the citizens of this state and this county, sir. Thank you, buddy. Thank you again, gentlemen.
Jeff, we're grateful that you were able to finish up here at the county, but you did a good job at the other agencies too.
Lieutenant Harp, would you like to make some comments?
I thank you very much. Thank my citizens of the county and my family for sticking with me during this time. That's all looking back, I didn't think I'd make it here, but I appreciate the opportunity to serve. I've done some good.
Thank you. Right. Next, we have a resolution honoring a leadership Davie. These folks have been working very hard, and I'll call on Mr. Eller.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to read a resolution honoring the Leadership Davie class of 2020, many of which are here tonight, to learn a little bit about what you do. And boy, they picked a night with 4 public hearings, didn't they? But I hope all of you see how important this work is and how we have to check a lot of boxes in the work that we do. But I'll begin the resolution. Whereas Leadership Davie builds a network of diverse community leaders who enhance their problem solving and other leadership abilities through shared perspectives and by working together. And whereas Leadership Davie is a comprehensive training program that develops our future leaders. And whereas Leadership Davie develops connections with key decision makers and partners who drive Davie County forward and gains deeper understanding of how goals are achieved. And whereas Leadership Davie participants learn about our county's rich history and future potential. And whereas Leadership Davie participants also learn about arts and education, government relations and economic development, criminal justice, infrastructure and planning, human services, and history and tourism. And whereas upon completion, Leadership Davie participants are welcomed into a community of past graduates who are actively shaping our future in their businesses as board members of local organizations that many of you may appoint someday, and champions in our community. Now, therefore, it be resolved that the Davie County Board of Commissioners do hereby declare December 2019 as Leadership Davie Month and challenge the current participants in the class of 2020 to be influential and effective within their own organization and within our greater community through personal commitment and involvement to help solve the most significant challenges facing Davie County today and bring about opportunities and solution-based vision for the future. So with that, I'd like to ask the class to come forward. And board, if you wouldn't mind getting your photo taken with them, we would really appreciate that. So Carolyn, would you and the class come on up? I'll present this resolution to you, and let's give them a round of applause. It's a big time commitment.
For the public and for the board, we are grateful for the folks who have signed up to be a part of Leadership Davie. I'm one of the past graduates of 2009, and I am amazed at things that have happened and changed in this county in the time since I was part of Leadership Davie. And the crew that we have this year is outstanding. They're going to be wonderful people to contribute to this county in a very powerful way. They have some creative ideas, a lot of zest, a lot of energy, and Davie County is blessed to have them as a part of what we're doing. We're certainly great to be heading this up this year.
Yeah. So I just want to say thank you, John and Commissioners, for supporting and recognizing this program. When I started the chamber about 5 years ago, that was something that was always commended by my office was, when are you going to resurrect Leadership Davie? And so we did it this year, thanks to Chuck Taylor for being my partner in crime in this. And again, when you're looking to add people to your board, please consider these group of people because they are fantastic. So thank you so much.
All right, moving right along, County Manager's Report, Mr. Eller.
Mr. Chairman, I'm going to be very quick because we're running way over, I know. I just want to note a few things on the consent agenda, coupled with what Mr. Vogler just talked about regarding the form of government you adopted. We're also updating our code of ethics, our agenda procedures. Tabitha Parrish is here tonight. The Board of Elections also have really done a tremendous job of getting us ready for ordering our new voting equipment. You heard Mr. Vogler having to read all the stuff he read earlier to be compliant with many things we have to be compliant with. The Board of Elections also has to follow a very strict process in order for us to properly purchase and replace our voting equipment. So I want to thank Tabitha and the Board of Elections for their leadership there. Also want to just send our condolences to the Howard family. on the loss of Miss Howard, and also the family of Johnny Patero, formerly with our 911 and Communications Center. Also want to thank Paul Moore for leading the park tour today. I have more, Mr. Chairman, that I can cover, but lastly, just close with thanking Lieutenant Harp again for all he's done for Davie County. So I'll conclude with those things tonight.
Okay, thank you. Right, we'll move to commissioner comments. Mr. Poindexter.
I'd just like to say thank you to everyone who came out tonight. It's good to look out here and see a nice crowd. Congratulations to Deputy Hart. I've seen you for a long time around the county. Appreciate all the hard work that you've done. Also, congratulations to the class of Davie County leadership class. I was in, I think, the second class ever, which gives you some idea how long I've been around. But also would like to say my condolences to the Howard family and their loss. And I hope you all had a happy Thanksgiving, and I hope you'll have a very Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year.
Ms. Finney.
I'd just like to say I did enjoy the tour of the park today. It was nice to see how everything's coming along. I'm excited for that end of the world to have some life and happiness going on down there. Congratulations to Jeff on your retirement. Enjoy. And congratulations to the leadership class. I was really excited to see a lot of new people here tonight. I hope y'all will come back. I want people to see what we do here and learn about what's going on in the county. And I think the best way to do that is to attend these meetings and be a part, and feel free to comment when the time is available. I always give a shout out to emergency services, but I got to tell you tonight, it's a little more emotional to me because we had a medical emergency at work on Friday, and they just made a big difference in our lives, and I'm very appreciative of all the people that came out. Most of them were volunteers, and it was the day after Thanksgiving, and they didn't have to be there, and I just appreciate them being there. I just want to wish everybody a Merry Christmas. I hope you all remember the meaning of Christmas and that we lift Christ up during this time. That you'll look out for your neighbors. If you have neighbors that are lonely and hurting, please reach out to them and show them some love.
Mr. Jones.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Leadership Davie, for being here. Thank you for all your hard work. I know that can be tedious. You're away from home, even some, during that process. And so thank you so much. I'll tell you, there's so many good things going on in Davie County. We visited the park today. That's going to be just a home run for this county. That's going to be a regional attraction, folks. It's not just for Davie County. It's amazing. I would encourage you when you get a chance to go out there and tour the park. Tabitha, I was down at the Board of Elections today, and she was able to use me as a hybrid on one of the voting machines, as I'm sure she has with many of you. The process is being, I think the process is being streamlined in terms of our ability to vote. These machines are really going to improve things here in the county. And I just want to say this. This week, from an economic development standpoint, we've got some good news and bad news, Mr. Chairman. You're very well aware of this. From a tier rating, which I won't get into, we did not change in the way the North Carolina Department of Commerce looks at Davie County, but here's why. We are, out of 100 counties, we are 7th from the top in unemployment rate. Out of 100 counties, we are 11th from the top in median income. So there's a lot of great things happening in Davie County from economic development standpoint, the park, all kinds of things that are going on. And we should just be proud and happy that we can raise our families here. And I thank you for all of your part in that. Thank you, Lieutenant Harp, for your service. and all of the folks in the Sheriff's Department, EMS, and our fire, praying for Don and his family losing Pat. And I will tell you this about Johnny Utero. You don't know this. Richard, you probably do, and you might, Benita, but Johnny used to be on the radio station here. He was Johnny Roberts, and I'll never forget that. His voice is just one of those guys you never forget. So he served, outside of communications, he served Davie County in great ways for a long time, and he's certainly going to be missed. Prayers for his family, and wish you all a very, very, very Merry Christmas. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I appreciate everyone being here tonight on this long-winded night. Commissioner Jones always is biased in which sport he likes the most, i.e. home run with the park. The park was a very nice and good tour for the commissioners today to see forward progress for our county for something that's going to mean so much to our citizens. Caroline, thank you so much for heading up this leadership, Davie. It's very important to our community to see young professionals get out and change the community. Lieutenant Hart, congratulations. Thank you for your service. And thank you for being here.
Reiterate all the congratulations that were extended this evening, well deserved. To kind of piggyback on what Commissioner Jones was talking about the economic rankings, we're in the top 20 counties of the state, and we're up there with the big guys, and we should be proud of that. We got a lot of very positive things going on, which I think was kind of brought to light, hopefully pulled together by the comprehensive plan tonight and in that presentation. So thank you. But appreciate you being here. Hope everyone had a happy Thanksgiving, Merry Christmas again. Remember the reason for the season. It's hard to believe the next time we convene it'll be 2020. So with that, I will say Happy New Year and thank you. This time we will move to the consent agenda. Anybody had a chance to look at that? Any questions or concerns about that?
Motion to approve, Mr. Chairman.
Motion. Do I have a second? Okay. Motion and a second. All right. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor, raise your hand. The consent agenda is approved. All right. Do we have any old business to come before us this evening? Seeing none, any new business? Okay. All right. We do have a closed session on our agenda tonight, and I have to read this. I know y'all are tired of being read to tonight, but here we go. I entertain a motion to go into closed session pursuant to North Carolina General Statute 143-31811A6 to consider the qualifications, competence, performance, character, fitness, conditions of appointment, or conditions of initial employment of an individual public officer or employee or prospective public officer or employee. Would someone like to make that motion?
Second.
Motion is second. All in favor? We are in closed session. We will be back. Thank you for being here. All right, we are back in open session, and I think have a couple action items we need to move forward on. The first is the county attorney's contract. Would someone like to make a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion that we approve the recommended contract for our county attorney.
Have a motion to have a second. Second. Motion and a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor of approving the county attorney's contract as presented, raise your hand. That is approved 5-0, and that will be incorporated into the minutes by reference. Okay, next, I think we have some action on the county manager's contract.
Mr. Chairman, I make the motion that we approve the county manager's contract as presented, including merit bonus.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor, raise your hand. That is approved 5-0. Okay, thank you. Any other business to come before us this evening? Not, entertain a motion to be adjourned. Motion.
Second.
Third. Adjourn.